Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Tell me about the local folklore of your city, town, or village. Have you had any experiences of it?
There's a road out in the country near where I live called Postboy Road. A postboy was murdered there for the mail he was carrying. It was something like $200, but back then that was awesome loot. Anyway, I would explore the woods near there. There are some fire trails and some gas line trails. One night my friends and I got drunk at a bonfire and decided to play capture the flag at 1 a.m. This is my account of what happened. I wore a thick gray trench coat because I was young and thought it was cool. I imagined it was like the elf cloak from Lothlorien. This was 11 years ago. I liked to hide behind trees and scare the girls. Made quite a bit of scare capital. Decide to up the game and go deeper in the woods, nearer where I think they're hiding the flag. Hear nothing for 15 minutes. Decide to look for someone. Flashlight on, walk around for several minutes. See a boy in the woods. Sup, brah. He seems disinterested in me, and he's wearing really dorky clothing. Try to talk to him. He won't listen. He keeps teasing me, egging me to follow him. Every time I get close, he's somewhere further ahead. After climbing a long hill, I eventually find a road. Great. Look up and see the old tree branch hanging over the road. The branch the postboy was hung from. Holy shit. Look at where the kid was. There's nothing. Look back at the branch the kid is hanging from it. Please help me down, he says. Run to the tree. Try to untangle the hemp rope. It takes forever. In fact, it takes like 30 to 45 minutes to try and untie this rope. Someone runs up and finds me. Dude, the game's over. We've been looking for you for hours. I don't know, man. Gotta get this kid down. Look down. There's no rope. I'm staring at a tree. Nothing. End up going back with my friend and drinking a lot more and then going to sleep. Wake up the next day and still don't know if it was all real or not. Alcohol, man.
Chetwynd, British Columbia, Canada. The whole town. I grew up hearing all sorts of stories. One is from back in the 1940s, about a man who went to one of the local pubs at the time. He was very tall, didn't speak much, but well-mannered when he did. He wore a long overcoat with a wide-brimmed hat, and his steps would come with a click. He just sat at the bar, mostly silent, and sometimes he would dance with people. He would dance with somebody a while. Then he would dance 3 circles around the person. After he had started coming to the pub, people started to go missing on occasion. My grandfather and his friends started to pay attention to the people in the pub. This man with the wide brim hat became a person of interest to the group, and they started watching him. They watched him dance. He made 3 circles around the next person. That person ended up disappearing. A couple of days later, they were at the pub, and this man walked in, wearing his overcoat and hat. He sat at the bar like he always would. And when he got up to dance, my grandfather and company got up too and stopped him, asking him to leave. The man obliged and started walking away. As he opened the door to the pub, a breeze blew his coat up at the feet. My grandfather's friend noticed something strange about the man. He whispered to my grandfather that the man had hooves. My grandfather looked closely as the man left the building, and sure enough, the man had hooves. My grandfather and his friends followed this man, and when they were far enough away from the pub, they ran up to the man surrounding him and attacked him. The man opened his overcoat, revealing that he had the legs of a goat. My grandfather and his friends killed the creature, apparently chopped it up, and then buried it in a cloth bag in the forest. When I was born, the town had expanded, and the place where my grandfather buried the remains of that creature was now a part of the town. And he said that where one of my friends lived is where he buried it.
My grandmother's family has their own cemetery. Her mother had 5 or 6 children that died before the age of 2. In the cemetery are a bunch of little hand-carved grave markers inside a foot-high wooden fence. My great-great-grandmother believed that without the fence, her deceased children's souls would wander off and get lost, or would be taken by strangers. Every couple years, members of the family make repairs to the little fence. And growing up, my grandmother would tell me stories about the strangers that took children's souls. Like her family had an entire mythology based around the strangers. My grandma's family had a bunch of weird superstitions, and any time they were questioned, the answer always was to keep strangers away, or to keep them from getting you. Anytime we went to that cemetery with the fence, we would always take shovels and buckets. If a grave was starting to sink in, we had to haul dirt to level the ground out, 'cause they are trying to get out. Don't step in the hole, they might get you. If the summer was really dry and the ground was cracking, we had to haul water because they might come through the cracks. My grandma always kept lamps in front of the windows, but at night she would either keep the lamps on or close the blinds. We don't want them watching us. Her closest neighbor was close, half a mile away. Finally, when I was like 5 or 6, she bought a bunch of those lights that look like candles and put one at every window. When she was growing up, before the area had electricity, her mother kept candles in the windows for the same reason. Mostly the strangers only came out at night, except they could live underwater in the daytime. This was the reason given for why none of my grandma's kids could play in water deeper than their knees. Wade out too deep and they'll grab you and drag you down deep. My grandmother never learned how to swim. None of her brothers or sisters or their kids ever swam. My aunt learned how to when she lived in Florida in her 30s. My mother is in her 50s and still won't go into water more than knee-deep. If the power went out and we didn't have the lamps or candles in the windows, we would hang blankets up in all the windows and light kerosene lamps in all the bedrooms where people would be sleeping. Also, we couldn't play any games on Sunday that includes cards, dice, or drawing faces because that pissed them off for some reason. Thank God for Game Boys.
Where I'm from, western parts of Sweden, there's this tale about a local cholera cemetery. The site itself is old, situated pretty much smack dab in the middle of our town, which essentially stretches in a semicircle around a densely forested tiny-ass mountain. It's not an especially remote place, but getting there's still a bitch due to the sheer elevation and overgrowth. Just one of those classic spooky-ass hard-to-get-to places. Bunch of tiny, barely recognizable gravestones scattered haphazardly across an uneven, mossy clearing. Anyways, legend has it, a group of 10 or so men from town took people afflicted with cholera up there and just straight up murdered them to prevent it spreading further, fearing for the safety of their own families. Ended up killing about 15 or so people, burned the bodies and buried the ashes. Granted, they'd die anyways, but I'll bet they didn't go out quietly. So one day they bring this young kid up there, and apparently he, prior to being beat to death, says something like, "The people of this town might one day forget, but this forest will have witnessed every last second and bring vengeance upon thee in our stead." Roughly, fast forward a few weeks, and 3 of the men who participated in the killings were found brutally murdered in the forest. Disemboweled, emasculated and strung up in the trees by their own skin. The rest reportedly succumbed to the illness themselves. Been there a few times at night, and it looked like something straight out of an 80s slasher film set every time. Can't say I believe it one bit, but it makes for a good story.
I used to live in Texas. 6 years, the longest I've been in the same state in my life. Be me 8 or 9 when we have a special visitor come into class just before dismissal. Eagle Scout from BSA and quite possibly the chillest guy I ever met comes in, looking for local recruits or anyone interested. Hands out pamphlets to everyone. Run over to the bus loop where my mother picked me up after all the buses took off. Entire ride home gasping for breath, ranting about how cool it would be to join the Scouts. Of course, she went ahead and signed me up. 3 years later, out of the blue. Fast forward to a couple months after this. Going on camping trip to get the necessary prerequisites to earn the Arrow of Light. Night falls, and some of the older kids are gathered around the outskirts of the camp, dicking around and generally having a good time. One of them spits a loogie over a nearby bridge. Everyone falls silent, staring at the guy like, "What the hell, dude?" Suddenly we hear a grotesque groaning from beneath the bridge and take off, leaving the spit chugger to double over laughing like the sarcastic ass he was. When we headed back to camp, we were read the riot act from our troop master about leaving no man behind. 2 kids and the scoutmaster are sent out to grab the guy. No one gets to roast marshmallows or leave the campfire until they come back. Everyone has some stupid folk story to explain the groaning. Some say a cheating wife who was left to burn in a house when her husband found out, etc. Suddenly, the trio come back soaking wet, the guy they went to retrieve drenched and shivering. One of the older kids who went after him says they saw him scream and jump with this maniacal grin. The troop leader denies it vehemently, popping out the damage control out the ass. Anon just lost his footing and had a little trip. Isn't that right, Anon? He nodded, and we were sent to the tents. Never found out what really happened. The only true ghost story I have involved a Boy Scout camping trip. About 6 of us were running around the dark woods. I don't remember what we were doing, but at some point we were running down this ravine playing tag or some shit. Near the bottom, I see this kid crawling out from under a log and it freaks me out, so I scream. Everyone else screams, and we all turn and run. Before I turn around, the kid disappears, and my first thought it was, trick of the moonlight. Then back at the camp, another kid asks who was crawling on the ground, and then a third kid who was standing in a totally different vantage point says he saw the kid too. We were just kinda stunned. Someone was smart enough to suggest we go back and make sure there wasn't actually an injured person down there. Nope.
Local sports editor is an alcoholic, abusive towards his wife. They separate but keep in touch. He promises to stay off the liquor, and they meet to reconcile. They were seen meeting up and heading off towards the rocky shoreline in the early evening. 2 days later, their parents reported them missing. The following Sunday, the wife is found in some tall grass by the water, strangled and bludgeoned, and also shoeless. The husband's body was found a month later by a fisherman, tangled in some kelp. He had his wife's shoes on him. Supposedly, the wife haunts the stretch of coast where she was found, the area now a golf course. Teens in the area go at night to ring the bell located between the 7th and 8th hole, which for some reason is meant to summon the ghost. There's no real connection between the bell and the murder, I think. Before all that nonsense got started, she was just said to appear to young couples, and was a bad omen. If a pair of lovers saw her, their romance was doomed. Witnesses sometimes have described her as wearing a long, flowing white gown with her arms outstretched. Several people, including a group of university students in the 1960s, saw her rush toward them and then simply disappear. She is known to move very fast at times. One witness, a man, reported that she appeared directly in front of him. Frightened, he turned around, but she was facing him once more. He turned several more times, but she always blocked his way. Then she just disappeared.
2 stories to tell here. The first is purely urban legend and holds not a scrap of truth. The second is an old Cherokee legend, and there are numerous stories passed down from the early settlers about it. The Sensabaugh Tunnel Murders in Kingsport, Tennessee. If you drive down Netherland Inn Road toward Hawkins County, you will come to the old Rotherwood Mansion on your left. Across from Rotherwood is Big Elm Road. Big Elm runs alongside the Holston River, and about a mile or so down the road it forks. The left fork goes uphill and crosses over top of a small mountain ridge. The right fork continues along the river. About a mile further along the river and you will come to a dirt road on your left. This is Sensabaugh Hollow Road. A couple hundred yards down you will come to a poorly maintained graffiti-covered tunnel, which is actually a culvert that runs below the Clinchfield Railroad for the creek and is always slightly flooded. This is the tunnel that is commonly referred to as Sensabaugh Tunnel, the old Sensabaugh homestead being situated at the other end of the tunnel. Urban legend says that either a hobo or old man Sensabaugh murdered the Sensabaugh mother and children and threw their bodies in the tunnel, and that if you go in the tunnel at night and turn off your headlights and motor, that you can hear a baby crying, or a woman weeping, or children giggling, or that you will see a figure with glowing red eyes in your rear-view mirror, and that your car engine will not start. This is all entirely bullshit. The Sensabaughs have lived there since the 1940s, and no one was murdered. Furthermore, the actual Sensabaugh Tunnel is a train tunnel about a mile away near the old abandoned Five Caves quarry. I have walked/driven in this tunnel many times as a teenager and never felt the least bit of apprehension. However, there is a small foot tunnel near the aforementioned tunnel that's overgrown with vines and difficult to spot if you don't know where it is. I walked this smaller tunnel one night, and only once. It was in October, a few days before Halloween, and kinda chilly. Me and a couple of my high school buds heard tell of this other tunnel and decided to check it out. We got there in late afternoon. It was still light. Took us a while to find the tunnel. By the time we did, it was dark. The tunnel wasn't long, it just went to the other side of the railroad berm, yet we could see no light at the other end. We started in pulling vines, tree roots, and other growth out of our way from the mouth of the small tunnel. I went first. Even though it was chilly, in the tunnel it was hot. As soon as I stepped inside, it was pitch black. We had no flashlight, and all sound, crickets, the creek running outside, the distant hum of traffic on Stone Drive were completely blocked. All I could hear was the trickle of the stream that ran through the tunnel and my boots splashing in it as I walked, and I still couldn't see the other end of the tunnel. Brad and Chris, the 2 guys with me, were apprehensive and didn't want to go, but I urged them along. As I made my way through the tunnel, it was obvious no one had walked this tunnel in a very long time. The ceiling was only about 8 feet, and the tunnel about 5 feet wide. Slimy strings of moss hung from the ceiling, and I had to brush cobwebs away at each step. I could hear Brad's footsteps softly splashing along behind me so close that I could hear him breathing. I also had the impression of many voices whispering, but figured it was just my imagination. Finally reaching the other side after what I figured was about 30 feet, I emerged to see a few houses, none too close by, and it was quite dark. "Well, that wasn't so bad," I announced to no one, as when I turned around neither Brad nor Chris was behind me. I approached the mouth of the tunnel, calling their names in a questioning voice. The only response I got was once again the whispering. I stumbled back from the tunnel, shaken. I could faintly hear Brad and Chris calling my name from the other side of the berm. I stared into the tunnel, realizing that it was still pitch black, but that I should be able to see some light from a nearby halogen lamp mounted on a tall pole on the Sensabaugh property. I ran from the tunnel mouth and scrambled up the steep berm. It was about 30 feet up, crossed over the tracks and nearly tumbled down the other side. Brad and Chris had never entered more than a few feet into the tunnel before they got scared and turned back, yet I distinctly heard footsteps and breathing close behind me in the tunnel. They said they were calling to me to come back from the moment they stepped out of the tunnel, but I was unable to hear them until I exited the other end. We never went back there.
I live in Poland, near the border with Ukraine. In my town in the 13th century, people found out the city laid on chalk. As it was a pretty valuable resource back then, it was begun to be dug out regularly by most of the citizens. Not to bother themselves with making a single entrance and have to walk to it later, every day people just dug from their basements and sold the chalk to other cities. After some time, the tunnel net was connected to almost every house in the city and to every public building to have better access to the chalk, to use it as a shortcut or in case of being attacked by the Russians. With such a massive scale of digging under the city, accidents happened on a regular basis. But of course, we don't need any security because we are Slavs. Lots of people died in the chalk mine because of the walls collapsing, and also war prisoners were kept there and tortured, so it was believed to be haunted. Also, lots of people were murdered there because it was a nice and lonely place to get rid of a body. But the chalk mining was not abandoned until the net of tunnels spread under the whole city, had 5 levels, and even reached neighboring cities in the 19th century. The mine tunnels saved lots of people from the Russians, but everybody who was there knew it was not a good idea to wander too far in them, as people who once get lost in there never come back. People who have worked there claim to be constantly hearing moans and screams. Also, there's a legend about a ghost that lives there and is a protector of the city. Nowadays, the tunnel net is approximated to hold the length of 40 kilometers but is inaccessible. Officially, there's a tourist trip in there, but it's only like 500 meters, and you gotta go with a guide, as it is very dangerous because of the slippery chalk water floor and deep water wells. My first time there was spooky as fuck, even when we were in a 30-person group. TLDR, chalk mines be spooky also. Skeletons and ghosts. Pick related.
The Oolonga Daglalla is an old Cherokee legend of a hairy, mangy dog-like creature, the size of a man that would sometimes walk on its hind legs. Kinda sounds like a werewolf, doesn't it? It's said that people walking on Big Elm Road at night would occasionally go missing, and that their mangled remains would be found along the road. Or sometimes just a bloody mess would be found, but no body, accompanied by the acrid stench of burnt sulfur and skunk spray. Those who escaped the long dog and the Cherokee name Oolonga Daglalla came to be known, reported a huge mangy hound the size of a man with burning red eyes that sometimes walked upright and smelled like burning sulfur and death. Other stories report encounters with victims of the long dog whose bodies were never found returning as ravaged revenants who attacked the living. Whenever a person disappeared, locals would report hearing low guttural moaning and howls in the night from the nearby woods.
The one about Don Bartolo is one of my personal favorites. Colonial times. Newcomer arrives to town from Spain. Don Bartolo is into the occult and shit. Don Bartolo is in love with his sister-in-law. Don Bartolo makes a pact with the devil. He will sell his soul to him if he gives him wealth and the love of his sister-in-law. Satan agrees with him on the condition that he will come to claim his soul himself when he turns 25. Fast forward to his 25th birthday. Don Bartolo is pimping around making this huge party, walking around with the most beautiful girl around who turns out to be, you guessed it, his sister-in-law. When midnight comes and all the guests leave, Don Bartolo locks himself up in his house. People in the street and all around town, keep in mind the city was small at the time, hear this insanely creepy scream followed by this explosion. I'm talking 10 tons of dynamite explosion level here. Obviously, the scream and the explosion came from his house. When the townsfolk roll into his crib, they first smell this rotten egg smell. Then they enter the house. Oh God.jpg. The whole house smells like rotting meat and rusting iron. Don Bartolo's wife is dead on the floor with this horrified expression on her face. Don Bartolo is nowhere to be found. There's this giant circular burn in the ceiling. After that, the house was bought a couple of times, but no one wanted to stay for long. Today it's a government building. It is impossible to clean that burn in the ceiling. It just keeps reappearing.
I'm from Bandung, West Java, and there's this public transportation car ghost here called Damned Angkot. Angkot is the name of the said transport. Pick related, it's them. Story goes like this. An elderly woman was looking for an Angkot at night. Sadly, the Angkot that goes through her neighborhood usually only operates until dawn, so the chance of finding one at that time was slim, close to none. However, in a stroke of luck, she spotted one approaching, even though she later recalled that she didn't really hear a car coming. The street was deserted that night. The lady stopped the Angkot and stepped in. The car was barely ridden. The other passengers were 2 young women and a hooded young man. All were facing down and not even giving her the slightest eye contact, as if they couldn't acknowledge her. Even the driver himself was barely seen. His bucket hat really blurred his face. The ride went on as normal, but the elderly woman really felt uncomfortable with the eerily silent atmosphere of the Angkot and decided to stop at the nearest intersection. Again, nobody reacted to her as she stopped the ride and stepped down. Even the driver was silent. Usually the driver asks to confirm whether the passenger really wants to get off. The elderly woman then gave the driver, who was revealed to be a 40-ish-year-old man with very noticeable bags below his eyes, her fare. She gave him a large bill, expecting some change. Suddenly, the driver smirked, stomped the gas, and drove away with the elderly woman's money. Realizing that she had just been tricked, the old lady screamed, "Damned Angkot!" And thus, a legend was born.
The mound-building culture near Macon used to be haunted by this pale, hairless, black-eyed man who was not a man and spoke with 100 voices that drifted in every full moon and demanded mica, quartz, and 2 children from the noble bloodline of the plateau culture that used to live there, in exchange for letting them all live. Over time, some of them set up shop farther down towards the swamps and built their mounds with walls and embattlements to keep the thing out. And it worked, because apparently once it becomes used to a place, it has no sense of time or geography and gets caught in a loop of coming back over and over. Eventually, De Soto came through and spread his filthy Eurotrash diseases, and the Mississippian mound builder culture collapsed. And the main mound is now a national monument and archaeological park. I grew up in Macon and never stayed in the park after dark, mainly because there are actual rangers and guards there. But I have friends who broke into the woods surrounding it from some train tracks nearby on full moons, and they usually say either there's this omnipresent noise you hear inside your head like a swarm of bees, or a shit ton of trumpets, or a voice that sounds like someone you know who could not possibly be there telling you to come towards it in the woods. Source: my 1/4 Muskogee grandpa and everyone I grew up with.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Early 1980s. A guy proposes to marry a girl he likes. The girl refuses. The heartbroken man drinks himself half to death, limps his way to the end of the town to end himself by jumping off the bridge, notices an abandoned house, gets a strong urge to go in the house, so he enters. The door closes behind him. There is nothing in the house but a bed and a woman waiting on the bed. The woman is the most beautiful one he has ever laid his eyes upon. Her skin is dazzling white, and she looks just like the woman who turned him down. She is wearing a green velvet dress. He instantly falls in love with the woman, a strong, irresistible urge to embrace her. They both fall on the bed, kissing and making love the whole night. When they're finished, the man gives her the ring his fiancée refused. She begins smiling and kisses him and tells him she loves her. They both fall asleep on the bed. The man wakes up in the morning. He experiences a severe pain in his crotch as he wakes up. He gets the blanket off and witnesses his crotch oozing blood. He panics and tries to tell his lover about this. He gets the blanket off the woman. A skeleton lies where his beloved should have been, with a ring on its finger.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.